Pit fighting is an important part of Imperial Orc culture that dates back to the time of their enslavement. Most Orcs enjoy fighting. They enjoy watching it, and they enjoy participating in it in much the same way a citizen of the Marches might enjoy a ball game. Battle is a spiritual experience for many, allowing them to draw closer to their ancestors, but at a practical level, they find blowing off steam by fighting helps them to maintain their cool at other times. As much as Orcs enjoy fighting, Imperial Orcs know that there is a time and a place for everything. Hotheads who want to settle everything with weapons are routinely told to take it to the pits. I'm Matt, this is the Orcs Planet, and today Sammy is taking me to the pit in this new video where we're gonna try something new.
Right, well, that's right. We're cracking open some Empire, but we're always cracking open some cold, tasty beers. Do you want to have
Hang
them?
on. I'm struggling with this. It's a bit... There we go.
Oh, that's sweet
Perfection
ASMR
itself.
like things. Yes, we are cracking open an Empire. In this video series, we're going to be not only opening up some cold beverages, we're also going to be cracking open some Empire wiki lore. This is so you can get an insight on things you might not know, getting an insight for characters that you may want to play in the future. This is a little helpful guide, and it's our opinions, we're discussing what's there. None of this is really game-breaking in any way. You can find out all of this information in the wiki itself. We will put a link in the description. And yeah, we're just going to be discussing through Matt's sultry tones of you reading out exactly what it says on the wiki.
Yeah, exactly as you say. Like, everything we're going to talk about is directly off the wiki. So it's common knowledge.
Yep.
It's, in theory, this is sort of a what every pit fighter, Imperial Orc, should know when they come to Anvil, or through coming to Anvil. This is stuff that you would know by being alive as your character in the wide world. It's nothing like secretive. We might go into a couple of stories of like things you've done.
Yep.
But that's all stuff that people will talk about anyway. That's stuff you did years ago now. So it's all out in the ether.
So do you want to discuss what you just read out?
Well, this is, like I said, this is where I've never actually read the pit fighting wiki before because I'm not one. This is where you actually know a lot more about me.
Yeah, this is
it.
This is like the one part of Empire that I know. So for this one episode, I'm gonna have that little edge on you. But anything else that we do in this kind of format, I'm gonna have to do weeks of revision just to try and understand anything.
Let's go over the first paragraph that I spoke, and then we'll take it a paragraph at a time, shall we?
Yeah, as long as I can have some brewskis on the way, I'm happy.
What called out to you from that first passage?
It's similarities with other nations. I'm not gonna lie. As soon as it said a marcher with a ball, I did have a little chuckle. And I don't read stuff and chuckle like that, but I was kind of marchers. I think for me it was knowing that if there was hotheads and things like that, it was to kind of take it to the pit and things like that. As you'll read further on, it's not just about that, but that is a way for Orcs to be able to settle their differences, their arguments, even if they're very banal and not really super you stole my pancake, how dare you.
I think that is one of the things that a lot of people don't realise is now, especially with the level of spectacle that you're putting on, the pit is supposed to be there for the average Orc to just go and air their grievances and just settle a debate. It's supposed to be there for the mundane reason, as well as the larger, the pit is our church, in quotation marks, and the spectacle fighting that you do.
Yeah, I think the pit has several meanings to it, and I think over the last 2 years, it's kind of been perceived in a different way. But it's not. I will say the pit is very sacred to us. Like, you don't just let anyone in there just to do anything like that. You allow them to go in there, whether it be human or anything like that. You've also got the more spiritualistic side to be able to draw closer to an ancestor. Now, if you look at anything that we've done, in regards to the pit, there's always been a shaman present that does the talking. You don't really get very many pit fighters that do all of the singing and dancing to it. They're just there to bring that crowd up. They're there to be able to get everyone's feet going. But the shaman is actually the most important person out of everyone, because they're the bridge.
They're kind of the reason why you get out of pit fighting what you do, because they're the ones that like can tell you, they can like divine what you're hearing and kind of make it out and let you understand exactly what you've done, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that like in particular kind of comes up at the very end of the wiki. That's like in the actual pit fighter section.
Yeah.
So what I will say before I read the next bit is that "take it to the pits" quote is actually one of the first things I ever heard an Imperial Orc say. We were back at Spurnal Farm, so the site before this current one, and there was like a big slope that led up to the Sentinel Gate. So whenever anyone came out of the Sentinel Gate, you went down this kind of big ramp, and you'd always have people on both sides, like flanking to watch people come back. And I remember seeing Irontide Vio and a bunch of the Irontide. This was back when he had an eye patch, before he was a senator. And he was getting really, really angry with some Winterfolk about the battle. I think it was a skirmish they were on.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of orcs that were like around him that were like trying to calm him down because he was like really enraged. And they were like, "You don't do it here. If you've got a grievance, you take it to the pit." And I was like, "Oh, that's so cool. I really want to be an Imperial Orc." So it really, like, that little thing just like, it brings back a nice little memory of like one of the first interactions I saw an orc.
Yeah.
Yeah. On to the next bit. As slaves, it was rare for the Imperial Orcs to be allowed opportunities to fight. Fighting skills are rarely considered an advantage for a slave, and few Imperial citizens were interested in allowing their slaves to harm each other. As a result, it was common for Orcs to fight secretly after work shifts were completed, which often meant fighting in the small cells or pits that were often used to house those slaves. Such fights were rarely fatal. A death would bring collective punishment for those who survived. But murder is not the point of a pit fight. It is about experiencing the thrill of battle and the joy of pushing yourself to the physical limit. The tradition of pit fighting was born of these secret bouts. Now that's actually really interesting, because to me, like the layperson, having not read this before, I assumed pit fighting was an orc thing. I thought it was like a species thing. But actually, it's very kind of specific here, in that it's an Imperial Orc thing. Like the orcs were kept in confined spaces, they were kept in pits, and they fought because fighting is in our blood. And as slaves, they didn't have a chance to fight.
Exactly.
And that's...
So it's very much like the Brazilian martial arts of capoeira. So capoeira is a Brazilian style of martial arts, but it started off as more of a dance-based thing, so when they were in prison, and that's why there's never any contact when it's done, so no one's getting hurt or anything like that. Sorry, my voice went a little funny there. But yeah, one of the main things that kind of like when I first read this, I kind of took away from was that it's not about going into a pit and killing someone. It's going into a pit and getting out a grievance or an issue or something like that, but not coming to the ultimate thing, because yet again, we only have one life, so you're not going to want to waste it over, someone spilling your beer or something like that.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? It's like, it comes down to the whole one life thing. It's like, orcs are inherently violent. They inherently like battle. Like, fighting is in your blood. So it could very easily become like, well, we'll just kill an orc because they said something bad about me. And actually, this pit fighting, and I imagine the other barbarian tribes have something similar. It will just be a different practice. But having that, like, escape, having that hobby, having that thing that sport that you can play, that like gets all your anger and your like pent up sort of aggression out is brilliant. It's just a very sort of useful thing to have.
Yeah, it's got in there, pushing yourself to your absolute limits. That is a really, really important thing. So when you end up watching a pit fight, that's not weapon based, should I say, you'll see a lot of the time that there is a lot of damage dealt out, but that orc will keep getting back up because that orc is trying to push themselves to their physical limit that they can't stand up anymore. That's why you won't get, in a pit fight, you won't get someone die or anything like that. The only way that it will end is if someone says, I quit, or they, in character pass out. Because that's the only way it stops, because an orc, when they step... It's kind of like an imaginary rope. As soon as you go past there, you've got that sudden urge to want to just give everything to what's there. And that's the kind of enjoyment and the thrill to it, really.
Some orc slaves were allowed to fight. Indeed, some were forced to. Prize fights were often bet on in the league, but such encounters were usually staged or rigged. The outcome was determined in advance. In the minds of most orcs, this profanes what should be a spiritual experience, cheapening it and robbing it of its primary goal. As a result, the considerable taboo against betting on pit fights remains amongst Imperial orcs. To bet on someone in a pit fight suggests you think you own the fighter and have the right to gain from their victory. It still happens, but those involved are usually careful to be discreet about what they are doing. There may be a taboo against betting on the outcome, but none against screaming your support for friends or members of your legion. A good pit fight is one that leaves the audience feeling like they have been in the pit themselves, their voice hoarse from shouting, their feet sore from drumming the floor. The brutal energy of the pit fight helps the fighters push themselves to their limits, but it is also what draws the attention of the ancestors and brings them close enough that the orcs can hear their words. Without the encouragement of the onlookers, their entire experience would be as soulless as a league duel, and as dull as a Marcher morality play. For the orcs, it would be without purpose.
Right, let's just start off, and let's just get this straight right now. You're on the wiki for a pit fight.
That pit fight against Shatesh was Val's very first mainline event.
Yeah.
We were fighting for General. I got paralysed and didn't strike a single blow.
I mean, that whole part just there was so meaningful, and it's got so much great information that we'll go over. But it was just when I was going over my notes and everything, I checked back over, and then I looked at the picture and I saw you, and I was like,
"What's Val doing there? He doesn't fight."
The most unviolent character I've ever met in my life. All right, so this is kind of like a quite a juicy one, and it kind of explains a lot.
It's kind of like there's two parters. There's the betting,
yep,
and then it kind of rolls into like the whole. This feels like the whole reason why you do, or why Bull does exactly what he does.
Yeah, so we're going to the kind of betting to start with. So with the betting, it was the first thing that came up when all of this big, pit fight stuff started happening. People were like, you can't let people take bets. It's like, I know people aren't allowed to take bets, and I kind of like was just like, I get why. Okay, you shouldn't do it. And it was only after a couple of read throughs of this that I truly kind of picked up on the kind of disdain. Now, the thing is you can do this in Empire. It's not saying you can't like physically do this as an in-character action. You can bet on them. I just wouldn't want to be you if you're caught by orcs doing this.
I think that's exactly what this is saying. Is it does happen. It's quite common.
Yeah.
It's a normal thing for a human to do. But if you get caught by an orc, you realise there will be consequences. And I think this particular part of the wiki is it's showing off like both sides.
Yeah.
And it's showing each side what their reaction should be. Now, conflict is a main part of Empire. Like political, PvP, conflict, all of that, that's what Empire is.
Yeah.
And creating little scenes where you have small arguments or small aspects of conflict, that's what drives the game. And this is one of them. If you want to go and bet on a fight, do it. Great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the wrong person sees you, or the right person sees you, you're going to get a really cool little juicy bit of roleplay.
Oh.
And that's the same for either. You know, bet on the fight and try and hide it, but also try and make it a bit obvious so that an orc will come and ask you about it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like, reading this, we have to kind of take ourselves out of our characters. Obviously, you know, me and Matt both play orcs. It's that taking a step back and going, okay, we're not actually our characters right now. We can talk about this from kind of a multi-aspect kind of look at everything. And I would say, sorry, I would say that, yeah, it is some really juicy play. I've only ever seen one person in the like 2 years that I was kind of like around the pit. I only ever saw one person kind of like, you know, going towards it, you know, trying to be a bit of a Del boy, like putting on like a fight, and you just see a load of orcs just kind of like slowly. You can just imagine it out, like the darkness. Suddenly, there's about 10 orcs surround this one person, and all of them like just that look, just walked out, just gone. Like, and it is so
just
funny.
Escorted out. Of the
camp. Like it's just one of those things that happen. It's some juicy role play for us as orcs. Obviously, we take it as kind of an insult because of the history. And obviously the history behind it is that, you know, back in the day... Sorry, the beer's coming through now. Back in the day, you know, we were used as playthings, really, for the Dornish and the League and stuff like that, as just for their enjoyment. And that's why there is a lot of kind of downplay and kind of just like, it's, you know, das ist verboten, like, it's just not cool.
Well, that's exactly it. Like it says, you know, if you bet on an orc, it's because from the orc's perspective. If you bet on an orc from their perspective, you're saying, "I own you. I'm going to profit off of your fight.
Yeah,
I haven't done any work for this. It's not prosperous, but I'm going to make money off of you." You can kind of realise what that makes the orc feel like.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just a horrible feeling when you're playing that orc. I mean, I don't know. You know, maybe people have done it over my character. Don't know. I can only...
But that's good.
Yeah.
If you don't know, that's great, because it means people are doing it and they're getting away with it.
I guarantee most probably someone has done it at some point. So we're moving on to the next section. This is kind of what I think a lot of people have kind of looked at me for, if that makes sense. That kind of audience participation.
This is the sort. I would say this, what we're getting onto, didn't exist before Bull came to Anvil. Like you really took this and made it your own thing.
Yeah,
we're saying
I love that. That's kind of the way it's seen of like that is what I've done, but it wasn't just me, and I think that's what a lot of people get twisted. As the character and me as a person, they're just like, oh, Sammy did this and Bull did this. No, it wasn't just me. No one is gonna come round and watch a single orc throw himself around. No, this was a help from Andy doing the first lot of posters. You know, from Owen kind of helping me get that foot through the door. Tom Keeley for I can't thank that guy enough. Like
just for everything.
Just for everything. He's an amazing guy. No, he was the one that kind of put me on the map. So all props to him. But people like Tanis, people like Zach, people like Lucas, and even people that aren't even orcs. Danny, who plays Lupo, massive contributions put in from him that kind of brought those crowds. Like, it couldn't have been done alone.
No.
And there is other people, and I don't mean to miss them out. I mean, I can mostly sit down here for days going, this person did this and this person did that. But I think that is the kind of thing, and a lot of people do see me as like that guy who started that kind of thing, but it wasn't. There was loads of us that were a big part of it. I was just that person who had a louder voice, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but going into it, the audience. Now, the audience around, we started, I think the first ever, like, I kind of called them the main events, but that's just because I'm looking at it as a wrestling term.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, pit fighting is not wrestling. Because there's some
so
die-hard fans.
The first one of what we would now call like the spectacle fights.
Yeah.
That was Bull versus Scar.
Yeah.
That was the head-to-head, wasn't it? Because that's Andy made the posters for it.
Yeah.
Scar found one and then was like, "What is this?" And that started the whole roleplay between you two.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it kind of started the roleplay for the fights.
Yeah.
And then that was like the first big crowd match that actually had a lot. It actually got a lot of people in, and it created so much roleplay because, of course, it gave not just the orcs but the human characters something to come and watch on Saturday evening, and something to come and talk about, and then really enjoy and froth about.
It did kind of. It then escalated even more so, and I think it's one of those things that you had a lot of people who took the archetype but never really done much with it, and then as soon as those crowds come along, people were just like, putting their hands up going, I'm a pit fighter, because it's with anything, we all want that feeling. And I think to sit here and turn around and go, I don't like the adulation of a crowd cheering me on, is just lying.
Yeah.
It's straight up lying. Anyone who steps into that pit, whether they're portraying the good side and bad side, because like every fight has got to kind of have that dynamic, they get those cheers or they get those boos, and that is great for someone's roleplay because it's creating something that they wouldn't normally get. So all of these people jumping in, and then suddenly a load of people who aren't pit fighters going, can we be involved? And then it kind of built up. So that audience did help, by going back to what PD put all those years ago. We kind of found a new love for it, for all of the orcs that were a part of it. It wasn't just fighters, it was, you even had, I loved it, the red hands were the medics. Every time someone went down, so we got that banner involved, and it was great. And it did create the roleplay, but it was always there, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, now that we're sort of reading through it, and we're kind of reading the whole, wiki entry, it's surprising. Not how on brief you are, but there's a lot more there that I didn't realise.
Yeah.
I thought maybe there were some times where you were taking it a bit too far, and it was becoming maybe a bit too, kind of gladiatorial. But actually, reading
it's fine.
it now,
we can say it here because there's no one to turn around and try and be horrible to us, making it too WWE.
Oh, there was definitely a worry. Yeah. Even especially making the belt, and suddenly we've got a wrestling belt. But actually, it's, and it will. I guess we'll go on to it later. But that's where the shaman, the items of worth, the physics. That's where everyone else gets involved. The artisans that make the magic item, because it is a magic item. No, in fact, it was hallowed, wasn't it? So there's priests
I did.
involved.
Yeah, we got
there's everything.
And that's even multi-nation. That wasn't even done by someone in our nation.
Well, we can't.
Well, no, well, that's not the point. I went over to.
It was Usko, wasn't it?
No, it was supposed to be Usko, but he wasn't able to do it. So I went over to.
Someone whose name is now appearing on screen.
I think it was Highguard. I want to say Highguard. And we went over there. It was this whole mission that I had to get it hallowed at the right time, and we ended up doing. But That's not here nor there. But yeah, it was the audience and things like that. I think a load of people kind of thought when those audience came in, everyone was kind of like, "Oh, it's WWE," and it's kind of just like, it's there. I'm not game breaking it.
I think it's one of those things where like we take a lot of real world inspiration, and bring it into the game. Like all of the costume briefs, they're based on other things. You know, they're based on like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or the Borgias or whatever. Like that, we take inspiration because nothing is new and unique,
original. No,
and the fact that Orc Pitfighting is inherently a bit like wrestling. Mainly because it's theatrical, and LARP is theatrical, so of course your fights are going to be theatrical. So actually, I don't think it's too far a leap, and I think what you've done with it is actually really, really good, and it's made so much roleplay for everyone. But we've kind of moved on to the next topic, so I'm going to read the next bit.
Do that sweet ASMR.
While it may be uncommon, there is no taboo against other Imperial citizens participating in a pit fight. Testing one's mettle against an Orc champion, especially a professional pit fighter, is most common amongst Dawn's nobles, seeking glory, and the more open-minded highborn looking for a fresh competition in which to test themselves. So that was only a short one, but there's quite a lot to unpack in it. Like, I guess one of your biggest questions that you get asked as Sammy and as Bull in character is, I am a human, can I come and join in the pit fights? First of all, do you get many orcs that don't want humans to join?
So I think the best way of doing it, and trying to be honest and not, you know, go too far into character, into subjects that I know there are specific orcs that don't like people sharing this on anything.
Which I will just say, that is a totally fine opinion to have. Like, if you want the pit as an orc to be just for orcs, that is fine. Like, you can have that in character opinion. That's totally cool. But it's nice that the wiki's kind of put this little tidbit in here.
It is, and I kind of... So, one of the big things for me going in there was... Because I kind of got to build this backstory slightly to be able to give you the correct answer that you need. So, going into it, a lot of people were kind of just like, there is secrets about the pit, you can't tell anyone. And I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. And then suddenly stuff happens and safety gets involved. You know, PD are kind of unsure if everything is safe and stuff like that. And we're just like, yo, we do safety briefs with, you know, this, that and the other. And we go through it really religiously.
So I guess just, sorry to hop in, but just to clarify, whenever you're doing a big spectacle fight, you always have a ref present. Because you are... It is, to an extent, contact. Whereas Empire as a system is very much opt-in for contact. Like, if you don't want to be touched, that is how the game is played. It's like opt-in for contact on anything. But you're doing something that's very physical, and you're grappling, which is against the rules in the battle, but it's fine
in that one area.
As long as there is a ref present for those big fights. So I just thought I'd mention that. But you don't necessarily need a ref for the smaller fights.
Wrong.
Oh, you need one for them as well?
Yeah.
Cool.
So this will kind of wrap into everything. I'm not just going off on some weird
sorry, I kind of butted in with the health and safety bit.
So PD, obviously, within their rights, they're very worried about any physical contact or anything like that. So we were just like, okay, so we are going to do a safety brief on Thursday, what I run, with a ref there, and I do it on Friday with a ref there. And that's fine. And that's the point where we have those safety talks about what is okay, what is not okay. Those beers are hitting me. I am really gassy. So, as I was saying, PD want to make sure that we are safe. And I get that. And that's why we go out of our way to ensure that they feel that we are doing everything we can. So safety and everything like that's done. big fights, little fights, whatever fights, have to be with a ref there.
Yeah.
Even with a weapon, it's different.
So with a weapon, it's different because that's actually how combat works.
Yeah, exactly.
But with the hand-to-hand fights, because it is contact fighting rather than I'm hitting you with a foam stick, it could very quickly become an out-of-character fight if things went wrong.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more. There's a lot more that can go.
So with that, it's down to, and one of the big things that I stress whenever doing any type of fight is that you have to be confident in the person and trust in the person that you're opposite. Because if you do not trust them, if you do not kind of, have a kind of tete-a-tete as such, then one, this is going to look terrible, and what we're trying to achieve will not be achieved. And two, you won't have a good time. And that's why a lot of people have just gone, no. And I've had it before. I won't disclose who it was, but I've had people before come to me and go, Sam, I don't want to fight that person. So we've gone, all right, fine.
Yeah.
We'll change that. And we've changed it. And we've gone, that's okay. Now, one of the big issues with that is the sense of spontaneity. So if you turn around and get someone from Dawn going, I'm here to test my metal, you've just got to be like, hold on a second. And there is that sense of kind of like it stops a little bit, but you would prefer to take it a little bit more safer.
So I guess the thing, because we've kind of taken this portion out of character, but actually it kind of needed it. So I guess what we take from this 2-sentence segment that I spoke out is, if you were an orc and you were a pit fighter, within your nation and within the other orcs in the nation, you have all the resources you need to be as cool of a pit fighter and as engaged and doing all the things in the pit as you want.
Yeah.
If you're worried about anything, talk to an egregore. Chris and Ed are both wonderful. They're great out of character and in character contacts.
Yep. Chat
to them. Sammy, of course, you're always up for a chat about pit fights.
Oh,
I see you shaking your head, but yes, you are.
Yeah. Anytime. No, I get it. I get messages from people who I've never met before going, hey, you're the pit guy. I'm like, hello.
And just to wrap up, I guess, if you are a human and you want to be involved in pit fights, that is entirely an in-character question.
Yep.
And you need to build up an in-character relationship with an orc or the orcs before you will be allowed to do that. If you turn up, as Sammy said, as a Dornish noble and you say, I want to test my metal against an orc, if you were to fight with weapons and you were to fight as the combat rules, then I don't see anything stopping you going into the pit and just having a weapon fight.
So I'm gonna
just as the rules say.
As the rules dictate. But this is, I think, another one thing that I will add before we move on to the next section. So it does say for people to be able to test their metal, to be able to go to the pit, but we might not want to, and that's the big thing that people have got to remember.
Yeah.
Now you can pay your way through, and that'll come up later. You can pay. It would be a very high price. But I have personally done it for a favour. Because there was that conversation between someone, and I guess I can talk about it very openly, but myself and Lupo, I didn't know Danny out of character, but when I met Lupo, I was just like, my man, let's talk. And there was that sense of roleplay there, and I was like, okay, you need to do your test of metal. I don't really need anything, right? You owe me a favour. And then that's the way it kind of blossomed. There was roleplay there. So just be aware, if you are going to step into the orcs and turn around and go, I want to test my metal, they may turn around and go, there's the door, goodbye. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind.
This roleplay is a two-road street?
Two-way road. Yeah,
it
let's
works
go
both ways.
Yeah, let's go with that.
It has to be fun for both participants.
Yeah, there you go.
Pit fights are rarely held in pits any longer, since it makes it hard for a large audience to see what is happening. Imperial Orcs still like to preserve the claustrophobic feel of the original pit fights, so they usually take place in a purpose-built cage of some kind. There are few rules. Fights usually end when one participant has no fight left in them. Participants arm and armour themselves as they see fit. Fighting unarmed has a tendency to remind older Imperial Orcs of the days when they were forbidden to use weapons. Provided there are chirurgeons on hand to tend the wounds and nobody dies, the matter is completely legal according to Imperial law.
Alrighty then.
Well, that first line was a little bit counterintuitive. Pits are no longer held in... Pit fights are no longer held in pits anymore.
I think it's that kind of pits as in underground, kind of enclosed, really kind of like, you know, you can only fit 2 people.
Yeah, it very much harkens to the fact that, like the pit in Anvil, you have created your own stage, and that's where you fight. So, like, I imagine when Bull moved to Scarsind, the first thing you did was you made a pit, in inverted commas. You made a fighting area.
Yeah, so I have 2 because I'm classy like that. So I've got one back at home, you know, Crow's Ridge, around
of course,
Crow's Ridge,
near Crow's Ridge, not quite anymore. White Lake,
White Lake, near Pancake Pass.
Packanan's Pass.
It's always going to be Pancake. And then I've obviously got the newly built school. No, so this one obviously is kind of like supposed to be the enclosed spaces and things like that, and you can kind of still see some remnants of that left over in the pit that you'll see at Anvil. So if you look at all of the tops of the pit, do you think someone can get over that really easily? I mean, bar from Zach, who literally had to climb up, but I had to hold him. They're jaggedy. So it's the idea that you are stuck there.
You are almost inside a cage or inside a prison.
Exactly.
You're back in the place where your ancestors used to be, so you might hear them louder. Oh, exactly. I get it! It makes sense!
Do you see where there is like those similarities that you can kind of take away and go, alright, that's fine. Bear in mind, like, I've gone 1 rung up on the pit, and it's pretty high. Zach's gone all the way to the top, and no one will ever do that again, because that was just crazy. But yeah, it's designed to be that way. And I think a lot of people never kind of look at it that way, if that makes sense. So yeah, some of the stuff that you've kind of gone over in that section, I'm just reading through my...
A lot of it is like, these fights are not to the death. And they are done... So my question to you...
Yeah.
How many fights, would you say, like, percentage-wise, are weapon as opposed to hand-to-hand? Because just from reading it, say I was a new pit fighter, I was new to Empire, I hadn't come before, I'm a new pit fighter, and I've read the wiki, and it said, to all intents and purposes, hand-to-hand combat is done by older orcs because it reminds them of being in pits. So I would be inclined to do weapon fighting. How does that translate to the field?
Well, let me crack open a cold one. So, if I can be completely honest with you, the whole time I've been going to Empire, I have had a whopping 2 fights with weapons. I have had 14 or 15 unarmed fights. So that's where the kind of comparison is. Because
and is that, are you making the distinction that you, as Bull, you're there to hear your ancestors, you're there doing it for the bigger picture, so you fight unarmed because it's... So you've got that roleplay there.
So from a character choice, I said long ago, I don't fight with weapons, I don't need to, I have my hands. And that's kind of been my character kind of arc and this, that and the other. To me, weaponry is almost ceremonial. Now, I know that kind of is a little bit slightly against, but if you look at it, you know, when you have the general elections, what do? Everyone fights in the pit, but it's not unarmed, is it?
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is the election fights that happen, they fight in the pit, but they're not pit fighting.
Exactly.
Ah.
Because the old school way.
Yeah, so that's actually quite a nice distinction in that a fight for a mechanical in-game title, like General or Senator or whatever, should be done mechanically. It should be done with the weapons rules.
Yeah, I don't think
that's the fairest way to do it.
Personally, I don't think there should ever be a general election that has unarmed.
No.
Like, I don't agree with that.
But that's really nice that there is almost that in-character distinction as well. That if you've got a grievance, that is like someone owes you money, you might do that with weapons, so that the person can get away with keeping that money. Or you might do it, well actually look, let's fight hand to hand, and like the winner doesn't matter. And it's a whole nother...
Well, yet again, I think this is a thing that you need to understand this is my personal opinion. This isn't the way the wiki has read it. This is my interpretation. The old school pit fighting is done hand to hand, and more of that newer, you know, fighting for a general, you know, is the newer version. What all the kids are doing. I'm cool. That's the way that it's done. Now, bear in mind, I will just say, if you want to fight with weapons in a normal pit fight over the argument of someone spilling your beer, you can do. I'm not saying you can't. My character, that's what they do.
Yeah,
that's
so
all it is.
Basically, it is up to the orc if you want to fight with weapons or with your hands, because there are some orcs who don't want to do hand-to-hand combat. That is just as cool, that's just as legit. Just make sure your fighting partner, like your antagonist, knows. Make sure it's like cool with each of you.
Yeah.
Sort it out of character, or just go to the side and have a little chinwag.
Like I've always said, you have two kind of polar opposites, but yet we're best friends. It's really weird, like in character. So you have me and Lucas, and Lucas in character is just a bad man with a weapon. Like I can't beat him with a weapon.
As in he's not good with
no,
weapons?
He is. No, he's
a bad man with weapons.
He's a bad man.
Okay. I don't get it.
So he's really good with weapons. Like on the battlefield and everything like that, he will take people down.
But you just said he was bad.
No, it's a North London thing. And then you have me, that is the more specialist with hand to hand. So it's kind of always been that two. I don't want to say pillars because it's not, but you have him that is very that way, and then me who's very the opposite way. But we're both at kind of like that standstill. What he is technically, to this moment, he is technically the next in line to challenge. It has been a very long time, but that's because of the current circumstances. But yeah, it can be taken either way, and I don't want to kind of push, you know, you should use weapons, you shouldn't.
Cool. Well, that has got us to the end of the pit fighting section. The next section on this page of the wiki is Pit Fighter. It's about the archetype.
The archetype itself.
So we're actually going to talk about what a pit fighter is now, and what the kind of people around pit fighting are. Like we're sort of talking more about the actual characters, as opposed to pit fighting as a subject.
I mean, I'm agreeing with you, bro.
Cool. Okay.
Like,
all right.
You're not far wrong.
Good.
You're not wrong at all.
Amazing. It's nice to know that I'm not wrong. Pit fights are a significant part of Imperial Orc culture. a revered practice that entertains and unites orcs in the Empire. Some individuals find themselves drawn to the experience of the pits, returning to fight there over and over. Some are drawn simply by the adrenaline of the experience, finding the roar of the crowd and the adrenaline of the challenge is too addictive to resist. The very best are able to become professional pit fighters. They trade on the reputation for skill and strength they have built up in previous fights, until their notoriety means that other orcs begin to seek them out and actively challenge them. Most pit fights are fought for the joy of battle. Some are fought to settle grudges and establish a rough pecking order. A professional pit fighter can charge for the right to fight them, because an orc wants to make a name for themselves beating one of the best, or perhaps they want to learn something from the fight. The best pit fighters are not just warriors. They are experts at working the crowd to a fever pitch. So some orcs prefer to fight them just because the onlookers make the fight so much more rewarding. The taboos against betting on a pit fight do not apply to making your own living from it. And the best pit fighters are legends, at least amongst the orcs. A few pit fighters see their role as more than just a great way to make a living. Pit fights are a deeply spiritual experience for participants as well as for onlookers. The energy of the crowd, the adrenaline of the battle beckons to the ancestors to draw them closer. Many pit fighters hear their ancestors urging them on during the fight, and this experience is what drives many orcs to return to the pit over and over again. It is even more important for Imperial Orc shamans who need to commune with the ancestors and consult them to offer their guidance for the warlords. As a result, some skilled pit fighters are closely associated with the shamans, working with them to decipher the wisdom from their words and determine what advice the ancestors are trying to communicate. These fighters see their job as a calling. They compete to make their battles as dramatic and exciting as possible, to better allow themselves and the shamans to hear the voices of the past. Shamans often query fighters on what they heard, if anything, while fighting. But pit fighters who emphasize the spiritual side of their calling will often ensconce themselves with the shamans for hours afterwards, working together to make sense of the ancestors' words.
Well, there you go. That talks... Well, that kind of, done quite a lot there.
Well, I thought it was better to actually read the entire pit fighter archetype blurb, because it's all kind of there in one. Like, if we were to talk through it as we went, you kind of going to say the same thing again and again. Really, I think what the main points are, it goes back to the idea that, pit fighting is inherently spiritual.
Yep.
It connects us to our past, it connects us to our ancestors, it connects us not just to our imperial ancestors, but orcs in general.
Yep.
And that also, it's what I really like, especially about this pit fighter archetype, is it kind of shows how important the shaman is, like how important other archetypes are and how they work together.
Yep.
It gives you some really nice roleplay hooks to work with other characters that you might not usually have a reason to. Like, if you came in as a new pit fighter and you didn't know anyone, you've instantly got a reason to go and talk to a shaman or a group of shaman to make a sort of partnership to kind of make your pit fighting better and to get more out of it.
Yeah, I would say, going through my time at Anvil, my shaman, should I say, has been Vec, who's played by Hannah. So anything that I do usually involves Vec, because that's the relationship that I've built up. That's
That's really good. I didn't know that.
That's
really good.
my shaman. But it is because, obviously, like, I met them OC, and I was like, hello, I'm Sammy, and, like, we got on very well. And I was just like, okay, well, I know I can get on with them well, and let's see how this turns out in character.
Yeah.
And that was way. And then if you look at it as well, when Scar was around, you always had Locke. And Locke was always the person that done it. So then now when we go to pit fights nowadays, we have, well, we don't have Locke anymore, but we had Locke, we had Vec, and we had Grud. And now obviously that will slightly change because of, you know, Locke going, so we're bringing another new shaman that obviously, you know, you kind of start talking to when they first start coming through. So I won't name any names, but there's one that I've been talking to already to be kind of just like, okay, well, you're next up, let's go. And there's that kind of, there will always be a need for a shaman. You can't have pit fighting without shamans. It doesn't work.
It's really nice that they make that emphasis, and it brings it again back to pit fighting being a larger kind of, it's like a bigger picture. There's more going on than you think. It's not just about, for example, Sammy's WWE fantasy in an orc mask.
Exactly.
There's a lot more in the brief to kind of give it depth and give it intrigue, and to get, more importantly, to get other people involved, to get shaman involved, to get preachers involved, to make sure that the shaman aren't making you too heterodox. There's a lot going in there. And so my question, almost to wrap up what has been our time together tonight, is, from your experience as a pit fighter now for a couple of years, I haven't read this wiki, I haven't read this page before, but you obviously have. How much of what is here is played out in the field, and what could we do to like make it more like what's written? Because this is obviously how PD want pit fighting to be. So what is there anything we can do to get back on track, or is it good? I reckon we're kind of like in our heyday at the moment. We have more people wanting to do this than I've been told was even prior to me being there. I think just what needs to be the common kind of thing at the moment is understanding for long-term story. Now, I came in as Bull and I was like, okay, I'm going to play this out, and I'm playing out my arc that I know I'm going to go on. And it's always kind of been there of what I desired to kind of play. I saw the pit only gathering maybe like 5 or 6 people watching on, and they were all orcs. You know, I got it to the point of where there's over like 100 people screaming, you know, a brand new orc's name because they've come out for the first time. And that was always by design. And I think just what a lot of people need to get back to is that long-term storytelling. To turn around and go, okay, well, you're a brand new orc. Have that arc that you're going to achieve something and then go through. Don't get me wrong, there is other people who don't. You know, like, you know, Zach, who plays Crunk, love him to pieces. He plays the kind of like alternate side of a pit fighter that just does it for the crowd adrenaline. That's it. And he's okay with that. And that's his thing. But I kind of went over. So I would say a lot of people who are playing or going to play pit fighters have a goal, reach it, but then always have that long-term story plan ready to go. Cool. So one last little thing I want to say is, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, it kind of is, it's going to debunk a little bit of the behind the curtain of how you decide how orcs win fights, because it's all pit fights, like hand to hand, are very theatrical.
Yeah.
And they're not done for mechanical gain. Like, if Bull was to win a pit fight, you're not going to gain like a title out of it or a resource. It's very much a roleplay thing.
So what you're trying to say is you want me to break kayfabe and tell you how it's done?
No. What basically what I want to say is, in the fight, in a pit fight, there are 2 people.
Yes.
There is the person who will be the winner,
Yep.
and the person who will lose.
Yeah.
Unless you, for some reason, decide it's a draw, which is very unlikely.
Yeah.
If you know you are going to win, for example, if you know you've got more hits, if you know you've got a Tonic of Surging Flame, if you know you've got a shield and they've got a mage rod or whatever,
Yeah.
or if you know you're going to win a hand-to-hand fight, don't fight to win. Fight to make your opponent look as cool as possible, because they are going to lose, but you want them to enjoy the fight as much as you are, and you want them to have as good a roleplay experience as you will have when the crowd are shouting your name when you've won.
Well, I think you just answered the question for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like rule number 1 is you make the other person look good. Rule number 2 is that you keep the person safe. And number 3 is that the person that's going to lose has to look strong. It doesn't matter if they're human or orc or anything like that. That's the idea. Because we're all going, like, what is the point of me going up against someone as my character and destroying them? There is no need. There is no point to that. There is no build to it. But if I go in and I make that person look good, they have a story that then moves on and on and on and on, and it builds up your reputation. There is no need to ever be selfish when doing stuff like this. Make the game bigger, because then everyone gets to enjoy it. And that's the main thing about it.
I think that's it. Like, Imperial Orc Pitfighting, on an in-character level, if Bull is having a fight with someone and there is a massive crowd, you are having that fight for yourself. You're not having the fight for that crowd. That crowd might be there because it's a brilliant spectacle, it's wonderful to watch, but you are having that fight for yourself. However, out of character, you also have to remember that there are lots of people watching you, and you do need to put on a good show so that they have fun. Because at the end of the day, we're all role-playing together, we're all playing this make-believe game as a group, and as long as the two people in the fight are looking as cool as possible, they're safe, they're having fun, that's the most important thing, and the victor eventually wins, the most important thing is to make everyone enjoy themselves. That includes the shaman who are doing their cool roleplay thing. That includes the physics who then come and heal you after the fight and get to do traumatic wounds because the rest there. That includes the crowd because they've got to shout and make it wonderful for you guys.
I mean, I like to think of it as it brings everyone together. Like, I've seen, like, you know, kids at the pit fight. Like, I've seen, like, every type of nation there represented to scream on. But it is about the two people in that pit doing what they do and just enjoying it. And I think that's another thing that we kind of need to really drive home. This archetype, more than any other archetype, is about those short bursts of enjoyment. Entertainment
and enjoyment.
I know, I'm making up words, right?
Just like Michelle with Stars.
I know, right?
Oh, jeez, the beer's getting to me.
I know, right?
Wow.
I mean, I'm on my, like... I've had quite a lot already. No, it's about the enjoyment, because the thing is, as a pit fighter, you don't get very many other times to be special. But those few that you do, you need to enjoy and you need to embrace. And I think you really do when there's a bigger crowd there. But that's just my personal opinion. All of this has been kind of my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that's like, again, just to sort of reiterate what we're doing. Like, this is, I have never read this particular page of the wiki before. I'm not a pit fighter. Val is a preacher. Sammy is a pit fighter, has been for a couple of years. You kind of know what's going on, so it's been interesting to have both of our opinions on like what. Me kind of siding with the wiki, you kind of siding with what happens in the field, and it's nice that they join up. And actually, there's quite a lot of stuff that is the same as it should be because that's where it comes from. Just to end again, probably the fifth time I've said that now.
Yeah.
It mentions pit fighters making an income. it mentions orcs paying other orcs to fight them. I only mention it because we're not going to talk about it, because that very much is an in-character choice.
Yeah.
You can make in-character money
Oh.
out of being a pit fighter. You can use your archetype to make an income.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing. That's all I'm going to say, is it is possible.
Yep.
But that's something to sort out and organise in character as your orc against whoever you're fighting against. I would just say read that passage specifically if that's something you, our dear viewer or listener, is thinking about. If you want to become a professional pit fighter, that's
I love
really
how we're
cool.
called professional pit fighters.
I didn't know you could go professional.
I know, I went pro. It was like, okay, sure.
So yeah, I think that's a really good place to end. We've gone through the whole pit fighting wiki page. We've gone through the pit fighter archetype. I think we've given people a lot of food for thought. Food for thought. If you are a pit fighter and you're listening, write in the comments some things you enjoy about pit fighting, or any other advice you have, because of course we can't say everything.
Exactly. We can only say our opinions. So I would like to thank Matt for coming up with the kind of concepts of this video. So obviously this has been cracking open an empire, and we're also cracking open a few cold ones. If you've got any ideas that you want us to talk about next time, drop it in the comment section below, and we will talk about the wiki. We will talk about the empire that we wish to crack open so you can drink the goodness that's inside. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And with that said, and with that done, thank you very much.
Bye! Most orcs enjoy fighting, or watching others fight, in as much the same way a citizen of the Marches might enjoy a ball game. Consequently, wherever Imperial orcs are found, there is likely to be a place set aside for pit fighting. This practice allows for weapon training and grudge settling in front of an appreciative audience. While on a practical level, fighting allows orcs to deal with frustration or boredom while keeping a clear head at other times. Pit fights are never to the death. Killing someone in a pit fight is as much as murder as killing someone in the tavern. Some orcs find the experience of pit fights to be so powerful that they dedicate themselves to becoming professional pit fighters. Drawn by the roar of the crowd, the challenge, or by the profound spiritual experience of unleashing the violence that thunders in the blood of all orcs.